Hi guys, Miss Francis here to continue our discussion on ecology. So we learned that organisms can grow either exponentially or logistically. Well, they can also be categorized as K-selected organisms or R-selected organisms. So in K-selections, organisms live and reproduce around K, where remember K in our mathematical equation represents carrying capacity. They are sensitive to population density and they follow the logistic growth curve, whereas organisms that exhibit R selection have high rates of reproduction and occur in varied environments in which population densities fluctuate. These types of organisms follow an exponential growth curve for a period of time. So let's get some examples of R-selected populations or K-selected populations. An example of an R-selected population is a group of mosquitoes in the spring. In the spring, there are abundant resources for these mosquitoes, so they exhibit an exponential growth. On the other hand, an example of a K-selected population would be a group of giraffes, because the giraffes are limited by their carrying capacity, so they are a logistically growing population. So let's look at this summary chart, which compares and contrasts R-selected and K-selected organisms. R-selected organisms have a limited homeostatic capability. They don't have extensive nervous systems or extensive feedback mechanisms to help them maintain homeostasis, whereas K-selected organisms do have extensive homeostatic capability. They have extensive nervous systems and mechanisms that help them maintain homeostasis. As far as maturation time, R-selected organisms have a very short maturation time. Think back to our fruit flies. They can mature, our females can mature after 8 hours of their life, whereas K-selected organisms have a long maturation time. For example, humans, their maturation occurs during puberty, which usually happens during the teenage years. R-selected organisms have a short lifespan. Back to our fruit fly example, those fruit flies have a lifespan of approximately 2 weeks, whereas K-selected organisms, back to our human example, have a long lifespan. I think the current global average is 85 years old, something along those lines. R-selected organisms have a high mortality rate, mortality meaning death, whereas K-selected organisms have a low mortality rate. R-selected organisms have many small offspring. Back to our mosquitoes, the females can lay up to 500 eggs at a time. But remember, you had to look at those 500 eggs in that sac underneath a microscope. It was a really small size. Whereas K-selected organisms have few offspring that happen to be large. For example, elephants give birth to one elephant every 2 years. Humans give birth to, well, I guess 1 human, 2 humans if it's twins, 3 humans if it's triplets, but still a relatively small number. And their gestation period is 9 months. That's relatively long. R-selected, how many reproductions do they have in a lifetime? Only 1, whereas K-selected organisms can have several numbers of offspring or numbers of reproductions in a lifetime. So humans can have several reproduction times, meaning they can have multiple offspring. R-selected organisms, when does that first reproduction happen? At an early age, a young age, whereas K-selected organisms usually have their first reproduction occurrence at a later age. R-selected organisms have no parental care. You're kind of left to fend on your own. It's a sink or swim kind of situation, whereas your K-selected organisms often have extensive parental care. In fact, some organisms stay with their parents for their entire lifespan.